Hi, I'm Lisa Thompson, and today I would like to talk about quite an important and um, relevant to many people topic. And a lot of psychologists actually receive inquiries from their clients regarding the same topic. And we today are going to talk about a negative belief of I'm not good enough to be chosen. So this negative belief actually is something that affects a lot of people's relationships and other spheres of their lives. So today I would like to dive into the explanation to the causes, what actually causes this negative belief, and explanation from psychology and biology point of view. Also, we're going to go through some examples from real life scenarios, and we're also going to explore the common ways of addressing these issues by psychologists. And I'm also going to share my approach, which I have when we address such issues with people who I work with in therapy. However, my approach is actually quite different from the common approaches in psychology, and I'll explain later on why.
Okay, so I'm not good enough to be chosen. What are the causes of this negative belief?
In psychology, the main percentage, the biggest percentage of people with this issue actually are people who have siblings. And it usually starts with a baby being born, in any family, a baby being born who receives all that undivided attention from both parents, from extended family and relatives and other people. So the baby is automatically, by default, is already chosen. So the baby gets all their needs met. The baby is heard. The baby is seen. So that's what we call by being chosen, by getting all that undivided attention, almost like being made to be feel special. And then at some point, many families have more children, which means a younger sibling appears, and the older child starts feeling somewhat reduction in attention. And what we then see usually what happens in families like that, when families have more than one children, the youngest one gets more attention than the older ones. So that's why it's crucial for all the parents, for all the families out there, to make sure they provide equal amount of attention to all children in the family. So what happens to the older child in that situation? They actually start feeling less loved, sometimes not even loved at all. They also feel that they find themselves in a scenario of comparing themselves to the younger siblings. So sometimes you probably hear your children or your siblings or other people saying that their younger siblings were actually not handled as strict as they were by their parents, or maybe their parents were not as harsh on them as they were on them. And that feeling of being less valued, less important, actually develops the so-called negative belief from very early days, when a person growing up deep inside actually believes that they're not good enough to be chosen because somebody else is going to be better than them.
Okay, so what happens to adult women with such negative beliefs?
So with the adult women in such a scenario, we have obviously just covered the causes, the common causes when the baby is actually first born and how they develop this negative belief in the first place. When we speak about women in particular, when women grow up with such negative belief, they actually going into relationships carry that so-called emotional baggage with them. So when a child actually goes through a phase of not feeling important anymore, not feeling valued, and not feeling chosen, they actually start developing the so-called belief where the emotional trauma actually happens to the child in that scenario. So when a lady or a girl grows up, that emotional baggage is then basically carried into all of their relationships. So what happens with ladies in that scenario? They end up choosing guys who are less available or not available at all. So bluntly speaking, those women tend to choose men who are already in other relationships, could be married, could be with some other partners. However, that sort of a scenario is actually quickly is labeled with somebody not being maybe brought up in a good way, in an immoral way. However, there's an explanation to that. Women in that scenario with that negative belief actually have an interesting history of relationship with their own fathers. So usually this negative belief is formed from the days when little girls' parents probably got divorced. So the mother, usually it's the mothers who end up having the children and looking after them and raising them, where the father maybe sees the child or children at weekends or a couple of times a week, but it's the mother who usually has the kids. So the mother then could have gone through quite a traumatic divorce, could have been hurt by the ex-partner, ex-husband, could have been seriously traumatized, whether physically or emotionally. So in an attempt to protect their child, the mother actually protects the daughter from the father as well by reducing the contact, by mentioning negative things about the father, and the girl basically is already deprived from the contact with the father. What it does from psychology and biology point of view, a girl growing up like that is already deprived from the main relationship with the man in her life, which is the relationship with her father. And hence, growing up, obviously, there is that feeling of rejection is what a little girl feels. It's a very unconscious feeling where the girl feels abandoned and feels rejected because the mother's words about the father would have been quite negative and it would have been quite in a protective way. So the girl forms that opinion of the relationship being quite either negative or they're missing out on a lot. So the contact with father there would have basically affected a lot of the belief in little girl's mind.
Okay. Okay. And does this negative belief also affect men?
In psychology, there is actually a lot of explanation to how this negative belief of I'm not good enough to be chosen affecting men as well. So it's not just women. The way it affects men in particular actually starts from childhood days as well. So when you probably hear about traumas or childhood traumas, some people talk about um, don't get shocked or don't get scared. All of us, absolutely every single person in the world actually has their childhood traumas. So, however, what those traumas do, those traumas actually can form our opinions, they can form our so-called deep-rooted beliefs, the deep-rooted settings or deep-rooted thoughts, you can call it whichever way suits, but we're talking about negative beliefs here, which actually are quite destructive in our relationships, in our grown-up lives, in our behavioral strategies, and sometimes in other aspects of our life as well, like careers and friendships and building relationships. So when it comes to men developing such a negative belief, I'll give you an example. So a little boy, for example, growing up with a mother who is quite authoritarian, quite demanding, forms that belief that all women are pretty much the same. So this is the first relationship with an opposite sex person the boy has is basically a relationship with their mother. So growing up, that person, that man, will be more prone to end up in a relationship with a woman who is quite demanding and authoritarian, who will pretty much be the main person in the relationship who will be giving that man instructions and sometimes orders as well.
So, what are the common solutions in psychology when addressing this issue?
With regards to the solutions to addressing this issue of the negative belief of I'm not good enough to be chosen, um, a lot of psychologists out there have already been working on this issue with a lot of people across the world. The common recommendations out there are from those psychologists are to is basically to work on those childhood traumas, to heal from those traumas, to go through so-called separation process, and there is terminology like that as well in psychology. And then other recommendations also include from psychologists for those people to reconcile with their parents, work on their relationship with their parents. All of it basically is working on those childhood traumas by healing from those traumas. However, um, and I'm speaking from my own experience here as well, it's not because I studied psychology and I studied this issue for quite a while now. I have gone through my own experience, my own therapy with various different psychologists in the past, and I didn't think it actually was quite helpful. So I would like to hear from you as well how you think it helped you to actually build your new relationships, to come out of that vicious circle of negative relationships and abusive relationships and this negative belief of I'm not good enough to be chosen. The actual work with childhood traumas could be a good thing. However, in practical terms, it actually doesn't help to work on your relationships. And hence, my own approach here is based on the framework of cognitive behavioral therapy. The system that my approach has is not dwelling on childhood traumas, not actually analyzing any of that, because admitting that and facing those issues in your thoughts for years, I think, is more than enough. So, in order to heal from those issues and to break that circle, the vicious circle of relationships where you didn't feel valued or you were stuck in that belief of you're not good enough to be chosen, my approach actually is to work with the thinking patterns, the cognitive patterns. So what happens usually in actual real life, that all of our emotions and our behavior are driven by our thoughts. So sometimes working with just emotions after a trauma or trying to change your behavior is not effective, it's actually not possible. So that's why my approach is to first of all work with thoughts, how the person actually thinks following that certain trauma. What we do also is we rewrite those scripts. Unfortunately, negative beliefs are not possible to be switched off like you would switch off your lights or you switch off something in your car by just pressing a button. It's quite a painful and difficult process. However, it's possible, and it's the only way that surely helps you to effectively change your thinking, change the patterns of your thinking. Only then your emotions will be able to be regulated by yourself, and that's something we work with my clients as well. And only then people who go through those two stages of therapy can actually start forming those constructive behavioral strategies in order to break that vicious circle of those relationships and come out of that negative belief that they're not good enough to be chosen. And then only they can actually write a new scenario for a new script for their relationships, the relationships they actually want, the relationship they actually are worth, the relationships they deserve, and the feelings of happiness that they actually deserve. So based on the work with the thoughts, what we do there is we change the values of people by relying on other people's opinions, by relying on people's praise, by relying on external validation. We replace it with the value of your internal self, your inner self, where you give yourself that huge support from within, and then you know that nobody needs to judge you, and the only person who actually can give you that real value is yourself. So that's how we talk about the values in life. We talk about boundaries. We talk about the real self-fulfillment. And only then from that point of view of thinking of themselves as I'm enough, and I'm enough for me, and I choose myself, most importantly, only then we can actually start radiating the energy of being a whole person, as somebody who is happy enough, and then only they can start actually attracting people who will be the right partners for you, and only then you can build the relationships you want.